Welcome back for a review of One Piece chapter 1040. As it turns out, I was a bit premature in declaring Law and Kid the victors in last week's discussion, but this week sees the true conclusion of their battle with Big Mom. Much of what I said last week still applies here, and as such my commentary may echo many of the same ideas. With all that said, I think this week's chapter is a much more fitting conclusion, so I'm glad Oda spent more time on the scene to create a more impactful resolution. Before getting into the discussion, welcome if you're new to the channel. I do weekly One Piece chapter reviews, theory videos, and discussions, so if you're interested, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. The chapter opens on the next installment of the Germa 66 cover story arc. We here learn that Niji and Yonji remain conscious and completely unable to move while preserved in Montour's book, as the two are both replaying the events of their defeat and capture at the hands of Big Mom inside their minds. While not particularly surprising, it's fitting the cover story installment gives Big Mom a win, considering how the rest of the chapter plays out. Moving into the actual chapter, we pick up right where 1039 left off. Last week, it seemed Kid and Law had achieved a conditional victory by pushing Big Mom through the hole Law created straight through Onigashima. It turns out my assumption about their strategy was correct, but the scene was extended to encompass most of this week's chapter. Accordingly, much of my commentary from last week about the implications of the scene apply here as well. Law and Kid's accomplishment is certainly monumental, as through their combined efforts, they have managed to defeat an Emperor of the Sea. As I said last week, this is more directly representative of the rise of the new generation than it is the fall of Big Mom. In fact, this week's chapter seemingly reinforces just how powerful the Emperors still are relative to their challengers from the worst generation. In the previous chapter, both Law and Kid were very near their limit and devised a last-ditch effort strategy. Importantly, as I asserted, they realized their attacks weren't powerful enough to keep Big Mom down. Thus, Law's plan was to entirely remove Big Mom from the battlefield to prevent her recovery. Notably, this particular strategy was only possible because they're fighting on an island in the sky. This week's chapter makes it even more clear that though Law and Kid can claim victory in this particular battle, they still have plenty of room to grow before they can truly match the Emperors in terms of strength. We learn at the start of this week's chapter that Big Mom remains relatively unharmed from Kid's ultimate railgun attack, making it even more clear that their attacks alone are not enough to knock her unconscious. It takes another round of attacks from Law and Kid to loosen her grip and push her through the newly opened moon door. Then, to prevent her calling on Hera or Prometheus for help, Law encapsulates her in a soundproof sphere inspired by Rocinante's devil fruit power. I loved the scene as it signifies Law's victory comes not through strength alone, but is built on the will inherited from his mentor, reinforcing one of the most important and recurrent themes throughout the entire series. Big Mom then begins descending through the island with her cries unheard. I really loved this scene, and I'm glad Oda spent another full chapter on Big Mom's downfall. There wasn't much in the way of plot progression, but the extra panel time was needed to fully emphasize the gravity of this event. As I said last week, the Emperors each control vast territories and a massive fighting force. Unless someone like Blackbeard has ransacked Totland in Big Mom's absence, losing a fight to Law and Kid won't be enough to strip her of her Emperor status. In chapter 1039, Big Mom asserted that the Emperors have reigned for decades, and what this battle signifies is that their authority is no longer uncontested. The worst generation is on the rise, and the Emperor's grip on the New World is no longer absolute. Even if Law and Kid individually are nowhere near as powerful as Big Mom, they were still able to claim victory in this battle because strength alone is only a piece of the puzzle. They devised a strategy that both took advantage of their current high altitude situation and negated Big Mom's overwhelming devil fruit powers. The victory here is unquestionably theirs, made clear by the narration boxes at the conclusion of this week's chapter, but it's important to keep things in perspective. I'm very happy to see Law and Kid rise to become much more serious rivals to Luffy in the future, but it's equally important to remember that though the threat of Big Mom has been neutralized for the time being, she will live to fight another day. As Big Mom falls, she tries to grab hold of the frozen explosives from Kaido's armory, detonating one of them and blowing a large hole in the side of the island. This is something I forgot to mention last week, but a friend of mine has been saying for months that the explosives could be used to send Big Mom blasting off like Team Rocket at the end of every episode of Pokemon, and that more or less came to pass at the end of this week's chapter. In silence, Big Mom descends into the crater Law created, evoking the imagery of falling into a grave. Oda very rarely includes thought bubbles, so I really appreciated the fact that he here grants us insight into Big Mom's internal monologue. With her voice unheard, she laments Roger's act of starting the great era of piracy. His final words inspired the worst generation now on the rise, sowing the seeds of Big Mom and Kaido's destruction. However, she most bitterly resents the fact that he took the secret of the treasure One Piece to his grave. We here see the stark contrast between Luffy, who insisted Rayleigh not divulge any details about the treasure on 𝚬𝚙𝚘𝚝, and Big Mom, who wishes Roger had told the pirates of his generation about the secret contained on the final island. I'll come back to this topic at the end of the video, but this exemplifies the reason Luffy is the one Roger and JoyBoy have been waiting for, and why pirates like Big Mom, Kaido, and 𝚬𝚻 are unfit to ascend to the Pirate King's empty throne. In the last moments of this chapter, Big Mom descends into the abyss as another of Kaido's explosive detonates above her. She wonders what One Piece is, where it's hidden, and whether Wano holds any secrets, before being engulfed by the swiftly expanding flames, and then, at last, her thoughts return to Law and Kid, whom she will never forgive. She asserts that despite her defeat, this isn't nearly enough to kill her, and indeed, she will undoubtedly return to exact her vengeance. Again, this is something I already discussed at length in the review for chapter 1039, but Big Mom will leave Wano bruised but not broken. Law and Kid were able to neutralize her threat and prevent her from reaching the roof, and in so doing, created an opening for Luffy to defeat Kaido. This chapter makes it even more clear that individually, the supernovas are nowhere near strong enough to eclipse the strength of Big Mom, and with her crew and territory remaining intact, her emperor status remains, but is no longer uncontested. Big Mom's reputation and thus her authority are likely to be severely damaged by this defeat, particularly if Big News Morgans and the world's papers have anything to say on the matter, which could provide motivation for her character moving forward. As I said in last week's discussion, I still suspect that as a consolation prize of sorts, she could serendipitously stumble upon Wano's Road Poneglyph, depriving the Straw Hats of their opportunity to read it, thus necessitating another encounter, potentially on Elbaf. After all, it was her grudge against Luffy which first brought her to Wano, and the story of the Charlotte family remains incomplete. The tone of the story suggested the new generation would triumph over the old in this war for Wano's liberation, but Big Mom can't exit the narrative without first resolving her conflict with the Straw Hat Pirates. Last week, I suggested that Big Mom's story is likely to continue on Elbaf, and that desire to rebuild or strengthen her weakening empire may be what drives her to the land of giants. To be clear, though I believe she will again clash with the Straw Hats, I'm not fully convinced she will again be the primary antagonist of the Elbaf story arc. Elbaf is said to be the mightiest nation in the One Piece world, and is likely home to many powerful warriors responsible for maintaining its independence from both the emperors and the world government. Even Wano, with its mighty samurai and impenetrable borders, eventually fell to Kaido. All that said, it's quite possible there could be an antagonist on Elbaf like Prince Loki, who rivals the strength of the four emperors, and Big Mom's story could even end with reconciliation or some sort of redemption. After all, we saw she adopted the far more kind and docile Olin persona when stripped of her memories, and though it doesn't justify her evil actions, Big Mom's dream of creating a land where everyone can live in harmony is noble. This indicates there could still be some good left in her, worthy of redemption. That brings us to the last point of discussion in this week's chapter. In the wake of Big Mom's defeat, the newly opened hole in the side of Onigashima allows Yamato and Momo to communicate. Momo says that Zunesha is now very close, confirming he's aware of its approach. Yamato recognizes the name from the log of Odin's voyage, prompting Momo to elaborate, revealing another important detail about the island-sized elephant. We learned in chapter 821 that Zunesha committed a great crime and ever since has only been permitted to walk toward an unknown destination for an unspecified purpose. A short time later, Luffy, Nami, Brook, Chopper, Carrot, Pedro, and Peekums departed for Whole Cake Island, while Zoro, Usopp, Robin, Frankie, Law, Kinemon, Raizo, and Kanjuro went on ahead to Wano. Importantly, Momo remained behind with Inuarashi on Zou in order to speak to Zunesha and learn more about its crime and the nature of their bond. It seems Momo learned quite a bit, as he explains to Yamato that Zunesha committed this great crime 800 years ago at the end of the Void Century while it was JoyBoy's companion. This revelation is potentially huge, and though this topic is a bit too big to fully explore in this chapter review, I'll at least explain what I think this could mean. At the end of chapter 1037, the five elders suggested that Zunesha's sudden arrival on Wano represents the awakening of a mysterious devil fruit lost to the mists of time. I already released a theory video explaining why I believe the newly awakened devil fruit being discussed by the world's highest authority is 𝙲𝚘𝚙𝚢𝚏 no Mi. In summary, I think it's likely the fruit's previous wielder during the Void Century, potentially a member of the Kozuki clan, awakened this power on Wano and compelled Zunesha's 8-century-long odyssey. We have seen the influence of Tama's power over the Smile users seems to be indefinite, and we know that awakening extends a devil fruit's power beyond its host. We further know that those who created the poneglyphs recorded prophecies of the New Dawn's eventual arrival. All this suggests that the previous wielder of the 𝚖𝚖𝚙𝚢𝚏 fruit, somehow aware of the major events which would later transpire on Wano, assigned the ability to command Zunesha to Momo in order to ensure Wano's borders would someday be opened in preparation for JoyBoy's return. Now, what I didn't get into in that earlier discussion is what I believe the opening of Wano's borders and the return of JoyBoy signifies. Upon returning to Wano, after guiding Roger to One Piece and learning the true history, Oden suggested Wano's borders must be opened to prepare for JoyBoy's return. But what does this mean? Well, we know JoyBoy was a figure who lived during the Void Century, that the story of his adventures is recorded on Laugh Tale, and that like Roger and Luffy, he had many friends around the world, on Fisherman Island, Zou, and Wano to name a few. The use of the term return is quite interesting as it suggests JoyBoy once visited Wano, which doesn't come as much of a surprise considering the Kozuki clan were responsible for creating the poneglyphs. But what if JoyBoy was himself a member of the Kozuki clan who once departed from Wano? What if the Kozuki are his direct descendants? What if JoyBoy himself was the previous wielder of Tama's 𝚖𝚙𝚙𝚢𝚏 fruit, and used that power to punish Zunesha for its great crime? Or maybe this primordial Kozuki could have simply been a member of JoyBoy's inner circle of companions, a member of his crew of pirates. We know Wano is special for some yet-to-be-revealed reason. The poneglyphs, which point the way to the secret final island where One Piece is hidden, originated with the Kozuki clan of Wano. The borders of the country have been shut for 8 centuries, but were once open, and must be opened again for JoyBoy's return. But why is this important? I think answering these questions requires understanding who JoyBoy was and what he was trying to accomplish. In the future, I plan to make videos exploring these questions in greater depth, but I believe JoyBoy was the world's forgotten first pirate king, and that Wano was at the heart of what he was trying to build in the ancient world, the Forgotten Kingdom destroyed by the 20 Kings before the formation of the world government, a free nation of pirates partially inspired by the real-world utopian myth of Libertalia. I'm going to post a companion video to this review exploring this topic in a bit more depth, but it's no small coincidence Kaido and Big Mom's new Onigashima project aimed to make Wano the center of a nation of pirates. Even Sengoku noted that there's a reason so many of the world's pirates, including Roger, Whitebeard, Oden, Kaido, Big Mom, and now Luffy, have been associated with Wano. Ultimately, the emperors are representative of the shadow archetype, the dark side of Luffy's ambition. They're moved by the same forces as Luffy, and their dreams represent a dark or twisted reflection of that which JoyBoy was trying to accomplish. Though we don't know why, it's clear JoyBoy failed to effect global change, and now we have another piece of the puzzle. Zunesha's great crime was committed while it was allied to JoyBoy, and perhaps this betrayal was in part responsible for the demise of the Forgotten Kingdom. It's thus all the more fitting that Zunesha's penance involves its arrival to help reopen Wano's borders such that Luffy, representing JoyBoy's return, can pick up where JoyBoy, the world's first forgotten pirate king, left off. Big Mom wondered in the final moments of the battle whether Wano holds any secrets regarding One Piece, and indeed, as I have here asserted, it would seem the land of samurai once played a critical role in the events of the Void Century, with a special connection to the treasure hidden on the final island. Unfortunately for Big Mom, her desire to know what the treasure is without discovering it for herself reflects the fact that she, like Kaido, is unworthy of being JoyBoy. Big Mom even suggests that a part of the treasure itself could be contained on Wano, and while that's certainly interesting, I'm not going to spend too much time speculating about One Piece itself. I won't keep you in suspense here, I don't know what One Piece is, and I haven't spent time working out any strong theories on that topic, and honestly, I feel this is for the best. We will know what One Piece is soon enough, and some discoveries are better left on their own. It's clear One Piece is the key to turning the world upside down, and in the future, I will discuss the nature of the treasure and the true history in greater depth. But like Luffy, I would rather be surprised, because it isn't worth going on an adventure that isn't any fun. And when it comes to One Piece itself, discovery is much more fun than knowing. Just a few more quick notes before wrapping up this review. After Big Mom sets off the explosion rocking the entire island, we get a brief glimpse into some of the other ongoing battles. First, we see Robin and Brook are still making their way through the burning castle, though CP0 are now being held off by Izo, which will likely allow them to rejoin the others in the performance hall. Next, we see Zoro has collapsed in a pool of blood, and even when the entire island shakes, remains unconscious. It seems the apparition of death seen a few chapters earlier wasn't a gag, and as such, I wonder if Zoro is presently hovering between life and death if he hasn't already temporarily crossed over. It seems Fukurokuju has fallen, but Raizo hasn't released his jutsu, likely indicating Fukurokuju hasn't either, and thus it's too early to declare victory. Lastly, we see Hiyori has put on a fox mask as she continues to play the shamisen for Orochi. She still possesses the sword Ame no Habakiri, based on the mythic sword famous for slaying the Yamada no Orochi, but it appears she isn't quick to engage Wano's despotic shogun in battle. Perhaps she aims to first lull him into a false sense of security before striking him down. As Big Mom descended, she seemed to absorb most of Kanjuro's flame spirit, mitigating the threat for the time being. But importantly, it seems a small ember remains, which could continue to smolder now that Yamato has turned away her attention, perhaps prematurely assuming the battle has ended. On a related topic, Big Mom said anything she touches doesn't emit a sound, which seemingly applies to the explosives from Kaido's armory. The people celebrating the fire festival in Wano's capital remain blissfully unaware of the war raging on Onigashima. The massive explosion detonated by Big Mom could potentially alert them to the approaching island overhead, but we see in the last panel of the fight that it was contained within the sphere of silence, and thus didn't make a sound. Still, the light and resultant shockwave could signal Onigashima's approach. And now it seems we're poised to return to Luffy's battle against Kaido on the roof. Long Kid's victory against Big Mom was certainly well earned, but also made clear that though the two worst generation captains have grown stronger, they still have a long way to go. Accordingly, I don't think Luffy is going to simply overpower Kaido, said to be the world's strongest living creature. I believe Kaido's yet to be awakened mythical devil fruit imparts him with incredibly good fortune, most prominent when facing an opponent one-on-one. And as such, in accordance with Toki's prophecy of 9 shadows cast by the moon, I believe Luffy's going to need some help in the last act of this epic battle against an Emperor of the Sea. Overall, I was very happy with this week's chapter and the way Oda concluded Long Kid's fight with Big Mom. He managed the very difficult task of elevating Luffy's two foremost worst generation rivals while also preserving Big Mom as a credible threat moving forward. It's clear she was outmaneuvered but not overpowered even in a 2-on-1 fight. It's also clear that despite her defeat, her story remains incomplete. And now that the worst generation is on the rise, she won't underestimate Luffy and the Straw Hats when they next cross paths, most likely on Elbaf. That's all for this week's chapter review. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you want to be notified when future videos are posted, please consider subscribing and hit the bell icon. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. But most important, what did you think about this week's chapter? What did you think about how Big Mom was defeated? Where do you think her story goes from here? What crime did Zunesha commit? And why is Wano so important? Make sure you let me know your thoughts down in the comments.